Hi everyone, it's Nikki here and I am back with another video. Now this one is actually a prompt, a tag from AuthorTube. However, I have decided to post it under this Ask the Author moniker rather than ask an editor rather than ask an author, get it the right way around. Simply because it's editing related and I don't really get many tags for editing related vlogs, so just for something different, I've done quite a few for AuthorTube for Ask an Author already. I thought I would put this on under Ask an Editor just to spice things up a little bit and have some different content for my Ask an Editor slot. So this is the editing tag from AuthorTube and there are 9 questions for us to get through. So let's make a start. Number 1, what is your favourite thing about editing a manuscript? For the purposes of this video, I should say I'm going to assume that I'm editing my own work and I'm not going to talk about editing other people's. So one of my favourite things about editing a manuscript is often I'm editing after I've put it away for at least a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, and it's great to come back and rediscover the characters. And obviously you'll find things you want to change, that's the whole point of editing, but you'll also find things that you really love and you think, I really love that sentence I wrote, or I really love this moment in the story. So it's always great to just reconnect with your characters and with your plot. Number 2, what's your least favourite thing about editing a manuscript? For me, I do a lot of edits on my manuscripts, but there's always a part of me that's thinking that I want to get onto the new story, you know. It's the first couple of rounds of edits are usually okay, but as I get into the final rounds of edits and the final proofread before I submit somewhere, I'm usually at the stage where I just want to move on to something new. I feel like this project's done, but you have to be really strict with yourself and keep going through those edits and make sure you pick up as much as you can in terms of typos and things that need tweaking. It just makes it, you're more likely to get accepted when you submit your work, but it also makes the editing process with the publisher a lot easier if you've done all the hard slog first. So sometimes it's just that point where you kind of feel that you're ready to move on, but you just have to push forward with those edits until you're done. 3, would you prefer to edit a short story or a novel? Why? Obviously a short story doesn't take very long. You can edit a short story in a day. And in some ways I think I enjoy that because you don't have to worry about remembering things. You can just go through the whole story in one session and you're done. Whereas with the novel, if it's a 60,000 plus word novel, you're not going to do it all in one day. And the only trouble with that is, maybe you'll forget things, like you forget that you've got them all in one part of the city and you maybe have a couple of days, you can't edit, you come back and they're in a different part of the city, but you may not remember that. So you're perhaps not picking up on continuity errors because you've got to keep doing it in bits and rather than reading the whole thing. But other than that, aside from time factor and continuity, like making sure you pick up continuity issues, I don't really have a preference. Everything's got to be edited, so I don't really hate it, although I just said in that last question I do get bored after you get to about round 3 or 4. On the whole, I don't hate editing, so it's not an issue for me how long the piece is. 4, how long does your editing process take on average? Obviously that's going to depend a lot on the length of the piece you're editing, as we've just been discussing. But essentially I can tell you how many rounds I do. For a short story, I generally do 2 really solid rounds of edits plus a final proofread before I submit. For a novella or novel, that will go up to 3 solid rounds of edits plus a final proofread. Maybe 4 rounds of edits if it's a piece that I think's still got a few little tweaks that are needed. But most of my works, I write fairly clean first drafts, I have to say. The only thing that happens with me is because I'm a pantser, I don't plot. So the first draft is me just telling myself the story. So the second draft for me, or the first round of edits if you like, is putting in extra detail, because I tend to just do the bare bones of the story in the first draft. That next round of edits fixes any major problems but also puts in a lot more detail. Just fill out the scenes, get some backstory in here and there where it's needed. So in some way the first round of edits are not cutting so much as filling. And it's then when I get to the second round of edits that I'm now paring back again and really looking at the language more closely. So those are how many rounds I do on average, but how long they take is going to depend on how long the story is, obviously. 5. What's the first thing you do in editing? Well, I've kind of just answered that, haven't I, really? That first round of edits is more filling in the gaps around, and then it followed by the paring down and really looking closely at the language, which then continues in the next round of edits, and then the final proofread is picking up the typos. Which answers number 6, what's the last thing you do in editing? And the last thing is that final proofread, where I have to be strict with myself because I am a bit of a perfectionist, and one of the things that I do tend to start doing in edits is tweaking sentences, and there's nothing technically wrong grammatically or anything like that with the sentence I have, but I'm always like, oh, would it sound better if I use this word, or would it sound better if I phrase it this way? So by that final round, when it's a proofread, I have to be really strict with myself and say no more. Only fix typos, no more changes, otherwise I'd be editing forever and I'd never stop and the book would never get submitted. So the last thing I do is that proofread, when I say don't change anything unless it's actually wrong. 7. Why does editing matter to you? Editing's hugely important. I mean, I'm saying that as an author and an editor. You can't just hand in a first draft. I mean, for one thing, let's say you're self-publishing. If you're self-publishing, you do your first draft, you print it, send the book out there, and it's full of typos, you're not setting a very good precedence for readers to buy your work. You know, you're bound to get bad reviews, people saying this is full of typos, they were full of errors, and those people might not come back and try another work of yours. So from that point of view, you really need to edit, and you really need to get someone else to edit as well. I mean, I'm talking a lot about self-editing in this video, however, that isn't allowing for the fact that once I've done all these 3 or 4 rounds of edits, it's then going off to the publisher, who will then do probably another 2 to 3 rounds of edits themselves. So, and getting that second pair of eyes is always helpful. If you are writing to submit to a publisher, you still need to edit it, because a publisher's not going to accept your work for publication if there's too much to be done to it. You want to get the manuscript as perfect as you can, so that the acquisitions editor is going to look at it, go, wow, this is a great story, plus I don't need to do much, there's a few typos, we'll fix those easy, and it'll be ready. I don't want to have to do hours of slogging structural editing. So the more you can do yourself, the better. 8. Do you prefer editing to writing or vice versa? I'd say it depends. I mean, as I said earlier, I enjoy that first round of editing, coming back to a story and finding the things you liked, spotting the things that don't quite work and fixing them. But at the same time, that first draft's always great, because being a pantser, not a plotter, I don't know the story completely. I have a rough idea of where I'm going to end up. Maybe I have a few ideas for what happens in the middle, but essentially I'm discovering alongside the characters what's happening as I write, which is always great fun. 9. Last question, everyone. Talk briefly about your editing process and why you choose to use the process you do. I've kind of already done this, because I said in the previous question about the stages I go through, how many rounds of edits. I use that process because from trial and error over time, I find that that's the best. You know, I find about 3 rounds on short stories is enough to iron out any problems, fix up any typos. There may still be the odd one that slips through, but then that'll get picked up by the publisher, hopefully. And with novels, about 4 is good, and I find that that's enough, because as I said, if I push on too much more than that, then it is nitpicking, and it's not that there are problems, it's just me wanting to keep rewriting things that don't need rewriting. So that's answered a few questions anyway. I hope you found it interesting. If you've got any thoughts or comments, pop them below. I'll be interested to read them. Tell me a bit about your process. Either do the tag or drop me a line. And I will be back again very soon with another Ask the Editor for you. Bye for now.